Okay, hello and welcome everybody to today's webinar on behalf of Scilife. And the topic of today's training is on best auditing practices for auditees. And I would like to thank everybody for attending today. My name is Angel Buendia. I'm the knowledge manager at Scilife. All right, so before we jump into the webinar, I want to just make a short explanation about the structure of this live session. So the first part is this very short introduction. I will present you a very special guest today. She's Delphine. She's going to give you a training about best auditing practices for auditees. This will be the second part. It will last about 45 minutes. And then we will have some room, some space for the Q&A session that will last about 10 minutes. It will be the last part, so I encourage you to post your questions throughout this live webinar. You can use the Q&A button, which is below the screen, so you can post any question, any doubt you have. So I will collect all of them, and we will try to answer as many as we can during the Q&A session, right? Okay, so let's start. So as you know, the auditing process is mandatory for the recognition of any quality management system. And it's very important that everyone in your company is aware of it and is involved in the process as an auditee, right? Not as an auditor, but also as an auditee. So I'm excited to have here today with we have Delphine Malis. She's the head of QA at QBD Clinical. She's part of the QBD group, and Delphine is here to help us with this auditing process. She's going to provide you with an understanding of the typical audit process with a different perspective. She's going to offer some tips, some do's and don'ts, and she will review this process, this auditing process, so you are in a position to successfully undergo any audit as an auditee. All right, so if you want to enhance your skills as an auditee and equip yourself or your team and your company to survive an audit process the best way possible, for sure you are in the right place today. And I'm sure it's going to be worth your time today. So with that said, I want to welcome Delphine. Good morning, Delphine. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Angel. Good morning. Well, and good lunchtime, good day by now in our region. Thank you, Scilife, for having us present on this topic. As Angel nicely explained, so the purpose of today's webinar is indeed presenting best practices and tips and tricks and do's and don'ts when you are the auditee. So at the receiving end of an audit or an inspection for that matter. I have been in quality for over 15 years now, and I have audited myself, but I've also been on the receiving end of an audit from clients or of inspections. And that's why I'm presenting my experiences and a general process to you today. So in terms of agenda, we'll look a bit at, are we talking about audit, are we talking about inspection, and what's the difference? Focus and purpose of an audit and inspection, announcements of audits and inspections, how to prepare, what to do during an audit and inspection, and that's especially there that you will see the do's and don'ts come in, the closing of an audit or inspection, and then the follow-up, and then, as Angel said, we'll have a Q&A moment. So just to reconfirm, we're on the right end of the arrow, on the receiving end of being audited or inspected today. So first of all, are we talking about an audit or are we talking about an inspection, and what's the difference? An audit is defined as the systematic and independent examination of activities and documents, and typically that's sort of driven by the company itself. An inspection is really the act by the regulatory authorities of conducting an official review of documents, facilities, records, and other resources as are there. Does it matter? Well, yes and no. The stress perceived with an inspection is usually very different when you're talking about an inspection rather than an audit. And the outcome of an inspection can be more severe or more impactful or significant than sometimes with an audit. Overall, what I'm presenting to you today is mainly applicable for inspections, but you can apply it to the extent you find it useful as well for audits and depending on the area you work in to audits as well. So what's the focus or the purpose of an audit or an inspection? That is, well, not one single thing. Of course, we're talking about good practices, and then it will depend on the audit or the inspection what the focus will be. Good laboratory practices, good manufacturing practices, good clinical practices, good clinical laboratory practices, good pharmacovigilance practices, good distribution practices, and I'm sure there are practices that I haven't listed up here. But of course, what your auditor or inspector will look at will depend on their focus and interest. Additionally, of course, where they're coming from will also be determining to some extent their focus and interest. So the European Medicines Agency or European regulators tend to look at things somewhat differently than the FDA or than other regulators like the Japanese regulators or other countries' regulatory authorities. Versus another QA department in a company who may also look at things somewhat differently, even though overall the scope and the purpose of an audit and inspection will be the same. So what does it look like? So normally what will happen is your company is there, you might be inspected by authorities. If you are in a company that's providing services, you might be audited by your customers. And if you are in the devices sector, you might be audited by notified bodies. Your company should have or will have an internal auditing program. So you're auditing yourself. And as a company, you should also be auditing the vendors you work with. The focus can then be on the system or on the company as a whole, but you can also have audits or inspections more focusing on a specific process, on a service that's being delivered, on a clinical trial, on a certain asset, etc. And so how does this then work in general is that you have the ethical guidelines typically driving the regulations which are also supported by guidelines. Regulations and guidelines are typically translated into company policies, which are very high level. Company policies are translated into procedures, the SOPs we like and love. And the SOPs have an output in documentation and forms and reports. And so auditors and inspectors will look at this flow of events and will then typically use the documents, forms, and reports as a way to assess the ultimate implementation of the regulations and guidelines. Angel, I think we come to our first poll question. I mean, it's not just me talking, you're also thinking a bit. So the poll is, what's the purpose of an audit or an inspection? There's one answer only. Answer option 1 is to find the answer to the questions of what, who, where, when, why, and how. The purpose is finding mistakes, or the purpose is evaluating the level of employee satisfaction with their work.
Okay, Delphine, I've already launched the
yes, I can see.
poll,
yes,
so
thank you. Yeah,
perfect.
Let's give you some time to make your selection.
Okay, let's leave just some 4 or 5 more seconds. I think we are covering. Great. Thank you very much for your interaction. This is very important to us. All right, so let's stop the poll. Okay, and let's share the results.
Oh, nice results. It looks like the majority of you went for the option 1, which was to find an answer to a set of questions. There's about 10% of you who went for the option to find mistakes. And there's one person who's also looking at the evaluation of employee satisfaction. Thanks, Angel. And the answer is the majority of you went for that. Okay, my presentation for the moment, let me see. Okay, it's not progressing. There we are, now it's progressing. And the majority of you indeed picked this answer as well. So the purpose of an audit is indeed to find out what was done, who did it, how was it done, of course, to the extent relevant, why was it done, if it's not self-explanatory, when did it happen and where did it happen. And I understand the people who went for option 2 to find mistakes, because that's sometimes what it feels like. And it is true that the FDA especially has the reputation to come in with the idea that there must be a mistake and they will find the mistake. But it's not in the end the ultimate purpose of an audit or an inspection. Employee satisfaction is not usually the purpose, but of course employee satisfaction can be surfaced during audits and inspections as well. And all in all, this is really the same for an audit or an inspection. There is no difference in the purpose there. The level of attention may be somewhat different. So thank you all for answering that initial poll and sharing your thoughts on the purpose. So how do we go, or how does an auditor go about the methodology? Typically, the major points are elements of an interview, as well as going through a document review. And in some cases, I've not put a placeholder for that on this slide, but in some cases as well, a tour of the facilities. So there's 3 main elements that can be contributing typically to an audit or an inspection. Going into the next question, are audits and inspections always announced? Well, I would say, luckily, in the majority of cases, yes, they are announced. However, especially in the US, the FDA is known to drop in unannounced. Notified bodies in Europe as well sometimes drop in unannounced. With the fact that there is an unannounced element possible, that means you should be really inspection ready at all times. So how can you prepare for an audit or an inspection? But luckily, like I said, in the majority of cases, there is an announcement of an audit or an inspection, and you will have a couple of weeks before they will actually show up for the site visit or the site meeting. And you will have some additional prep time possible for you. So as soon as the audit or the inspection is announced, well, don't start taking vacation when you're in a quality role or when you are the auditee, because you will need to be available. So luckily, yeah, like I said, maybe the majority of cases we will have preparation time, despite the fact, and I think that this slide is honestly probably the most important one in this entire slide deck. You should be inspection ready at all times. So when you're doing your job on a day-to-day basis, and when your colleagues are doing their job on a day-to-day basis, They shouldn't be doing it from the perspective, oh, I might be audited or inspected, but if they do it correctly from the start with the expectations, as in Alcoa Plus, and there's a new guideline out there which says Alcoa Plus Plus now. So next year, Angela will have to update the slide a little bit. Is that if people follow these guidelines when they're doing their work on a day-to-day basis, we go a long way in being inspection ready at all times. With the idea that indeed people document their activities when they're doing their activities and not later to the extent possible. And that they also file and structure within the flow and not later to the extent possible. And that everything is organized so that you're not finding your documents to just have the paper equivalent of the olden days in stacks of paper on a desk somewhere, but that they are neatly organized in binders. The equivalent exists in electronics as well, being somewhere loose on a SharePoint location or even on local desktops versus nicely organized in a formalized document repository system. Alcoa Plus is stands for the elements of documents being and records being attributable, so can be linked to an individual time and location. That they are legible, that applies to both paper documents as well as electronic documents. That they are contemporaneous, so created and generated in time with the activities. That there are originals in place, so the first place of recording, or when that's not practical or possible, that at least it's a certified copy. And that they are accurate, meaning that they are correctly reflecting the reality about what was recorded. Additionally, documents need to be available, so you can present them when needed. Ensuring that when an inspector happens 5 years down the line, you're still able to access the information and it's still legible and available in the way it should be, and it's not degraded over time. That documents and records are consistent, meaning that they are lining up against each other, especially if information needs to be cross-referenced across multiple sources, and that they are complete. There is now a second plus, still need to read a bit up on that, that's about transparency and traceability. So next year, the slide will be slightly looking differently. And to have a nice quote with that, quality is not an act. It should be a habit. It's a quote attributed to Aristotle. So this thought is honestly not new. And it's indeed the best way to achieve a successful passing of an audit or an inspection. But having said that, you know, okay, you have done your jobs properly. Everybody's done what is expected from them. Documents and records and materials match the Alcoa Plus Plus principles. You have time to prepare, and you can still use that time to make it beneficial for yourself as a quality coordinator, quality manager, as well as for the team that's going to be part of the auditee group. So what can people prepare for? One of the questions that will typically come to an auditee is, who are you? What's your role? So that's a question that can perfectly be prepared, that the people who are involved in the audit think about how to answer such a question. Who are you? Should be easy, but under stress, people might get nervous. So it's always good to think about it. What's your job? But also what's your specific role in this specific activity, which might be only part of the job. Additional questions that may come are, how were you trained? And what processes did you follow? And this is a tricky one, sometimes at least, were there any concerns during the execution of these processes? Were there problems? Were there issues? Were there events? So people can think about these questions in advance and can prepare to answer these questions already in advance. So know what happened, when it happened, where it happened. So go back into the materials you have to refresh your memory, especially if the audit or the inspection is looking at information that happened a year, 2 years, 3 years ago, or even longer. You may need to, and you will probably need to refresh your memories. So be aware of problems, concerns, or issues. You refresh your memory with the materials that are there. If the documentation was good, it will be easy to find that information again. Be also aware of where the information is stored and how to access it, especially if time has passed. Do you still have access to that system? Do you need to ask for a new login information? Do you need to reset passwords? And also be aware of who to escalate to. You might get a question that you are not sure to answer, or where the escalation pathway needs to be followed. You may want to think about this as well in advance, that you're not on the spot need to think about who to escalate to at that time. So people can do a lot in the preparation in terms of how to prepare for the interview. Another thing is more on the logistics. So what can the quality coordinator do, or the audit or inspection coordinator do, is assign responsibilities, especially for inspections. You might want to do it for audits as well, depending on the audit focus. This is especially useful for inspections is have a note taker. So somebody who is there present in the room with interviews, who can take note of all the questions and answers, who can also possibly be in interaction with somebody who is in a secondary room to already highlight hot topics, so that another person can start to prepare for that as well. An inspection coordinator is useful to liaise with that note taker, who can also coordinate various interviews, etc., that might be anticipated. Define and prepare rooms, especially for an inspection. They will want to have a separate room to work in, an auditor usually as well. With inspections, I would strongly recommend that you have a secondary room for the team, where you can prepare documents, prepare interviewees, and where you have somebody ready as well to support the inspector in case of questions. Ideally, that room is as close as possible to the room for the inspector, so you can see what the inspector is doing and if and when they are leaving their assigned location or not, but also to be there for them as well. And the last thing, of course, that you do is prepare your documents and materials. So typically, depends a bit on the focus, but typically that will be information related to the QMS, so the quality management system. Things like job descriptions, CVs, and org chart are nearly always requested for the auditee team. And then, of course, scope-specific information. What I also used to do in the morning of the audit or inspection, or the day before, was to walk through the premises as well, to remove paper that was left on printers, notices on notice boards, especially if they were outdated. I would remove all of those notes, also personal notes. So the only thing that was left on walls and doors and windows were those things appropriate for an auditor or inspector to see. So that's a bit on the preparation phase. Then the audit or inspection will happen. Still a lot of site visits, but we see a shift more and more to a virtual setting as well, but this is more focusing on the site visits. Reception should be aware, of course, if you have a reception desk, that there will be an auditor or an inspector and who they should be calling when they arrive on site. So what happens during an interview, for example, we'll go through that. And I think, Angel, we're ready for another poll. So what following statement is true regarding an interview? First position, in an interview, only the words are of importance. Second point is that body language, speech, tone, and eye contact also matter. And the third point is that you can share all the information, including what was not really asked explicitly, but go beyond that point. to demonstrate your cooperation. I guess, Angel, answers are coming in.
Yeah, participants are very active, which is
Good.
really nice.
Yep. Absolutely.
So let's just leave some more seconds. Okay. So more people have recently joined. Okay, 4 more seconds. And let's finish now. Right, let's see the results.
Okay, so the majority of you went for option 2, where body language, speech, tone, eye contact also matter. There's a few that indicated that only the wording is of relevance, and a few people that also indicated that you should be volunteering information beyond what was asked to show your cooperation. It don't have a slide on the answer in the sense that I had for the previous question, but indeed body language, speech and tone do matter. If you're very afraid in a very slow voice, they might think differently of you than when you are there with confidence, not looking at them, you know, looking at everybody else and everything in the room except the inspector or auditor might also be a trigger. Obviously, the way you behave is triggered also by stress, and auditors and inspectors are aware of the fact that their people that are in front of them being interviewed are stressed. So they will take into account that there are elements of stress as well during interviews. But still, you know, be open and honest and have an open conversation with auditors and inspectors is the key, because indeed they will take into consideration the body language, speech, tone, eye contact, etc. I think we can take the answers. Yeah, thank you, Angel. So what do you then do? Again, stuck. Right, so the do's and don'ts for an interview then, to give an answer in more detail about the question that was just on the screen as well. So first of all, listen to the question. Oops, I'm going a bit too fast, but okay. Listen to the question carefully. And if needed, rephrase the question in your own words. And ask for clarification, especially useful when there's a language barrier or when it's a complexer question or your attention slipped for 2 seconds. Needed to rephrase your own in your own words, ask for clarification, but do not start to interpret, elaborate, or guess on what could have been the question. If you're not sure, just make sure that you fully understood what they were asking of you. And answer only the question that was asked. On the poll, we saw some people who said you can go beyond to show your willingness. Well, in fact, especially with an inspection, you can really be obnoxious. At sometimes you can say, you know, today is Thursday, the answer is yes, full stop, which is really annoying. You would never do in a normal conversation. You are allowed to do that in audits and inspections, and auditors and inspectors are aware of that. They know that we're also giving presentations like this. You can be a little bit obnoxious during audits and inspections, but what we especially want to tell you is that you should not be starting a lot of volunteering of information beyond what was asked. Of course, when you say it's today Thursday, yes, of course today is Thursday. You can make it a nice sentence. Remain truthful, factual, and concise. However, so don't start to lie or exaggerate. If you are, however, unsure about the answer, that's fine. It's okay to say, I'm not sure about this one. It should be mine, you know, I've done this activity, but I'm not sure how to answer your question. I need to find the information. That's perfectly fine. You say, okay, I will find the information. I'll come back to you with that. Or it's not yours to answer, you know, because it's not your activity. Then you say, okay, thank you for the question, but it's not mine to answer. It's a colleague of mine, and it's this colleague, you name them, of course, who they should be speaking to about that particular question. So don't start inventing things because the question came to you. Sometimes things are not your responsibility during an audit and an inspection. What's also a good point is that, especially for inspections, you might have this, is that you shouldn't be committing at this time for suggestions of improvement at the time of interview. So you accept the suggestion for improvement as it comes in, but you're not committing to it, and you say you'll take it under advisement or whatever, but don't commit to implementing this, because then they will expect or possibly expect that this is going to be part of your CAPA, and that might not be the right time to commit to a CAPA at that moment. So a skilled interviewer, like inspectors could be, and sometimes auditors are as well, they use certain techniques. One of the techniques they will use is silence. And silence invites to elaborate. We don't like silence. When we're talking to somebody, we want the conversation to flow. So skilled interviewers may use silence, and you might be inclined to jump into that with more information than they actually asked for. So if you are saying, okay, I've given my answer and the silence follows, you can put the question back to the auditor or the inspector with something like, I think I've answered your question. And then they will have to pick it back up. Another thing they do, especially if they are interviewing more than one person, is that they're asking questions to which they know the answer to. And that means that contradictory information is always going to be problematic. So that's why we're saying everybody needs to be honest, everybody needs to be answering to their questions correctly and appropriately, also in line with the documentation that's available. So there won't be, or at least as little as possible, any conflicts between two people saying two different things, or people saying something that's different from the documentation. We're still good on time, I see. One more thing is that happens is a tour of the facilities. Not always. During a tour of the facilities, what's strongly recommended is that where you can is that you follow the flow of the topic that's at hand, where it's possible and practical. It is you as a quality lead or inspection coordinator or whatever that will guide the inspector or auditor. Try to avoid that they will start to take the lead and just go and opening doors and enter areas that you prefer they not see or that is not in scope, because they might then see things and then they might start to dig as well. Keep note of which buildings and rooms that they have visited, and as well any questions and answers that were provided during the tour. And as far as photographing and videos go, usually we try to recommend to not have photographing or videos on premises. During audits and inspections, that sometimes is possible that they want to take something, an image of a setting, for example. Make sure you have a photograph of the same, so that post audit or inspection, you know exactly what they have and what they have seen. So not so much on the tour of the facilities. The last part that audits and inspections will be looking at during the audit and inspections are documents and data. Providing documents, again, focus on what was asked only. So only provide what was asked for. Depending a bit on the organization, is that you provide that information first to your quality representative or inspection coordinator so that they can also assess, is this the right document for the question? And do not provide it directly to an auditor or an inspector. Maintain a good document flow. If they're asking for 5 documents and you can provide 4 immediately, but the 5th one you may have to delay for a few hours because it's not readily available, give those 4 already. Do not delay the provision of documents where it's possible, because this shows you have control over your activities. In fact, document requests may already happen before the site visit. So they may come in prior to the actual audit or inspection visit. They might come during the opening meeting, then throughout the entire audit or inspection, and sometimes even post audit or inspection still. I also recommend, especially for inspections, that you have a tracker of both the questions as well as the documents that have been provided. So audit and inspection nearly done. We're going to closing. Typically, for a multi-day audit or inspection, I also recommend to have a debrief meeting at the end of every day. When the auditor or inspector agrees to that, to have a preliminary hearing of what are they looking at, what do they want to see the following day. That helps you in the further preparation for the next day as well. At the final day, you will have a closing, and you should be asking for it if it's not planned, is that you have a closing meeting. Limit the attendance to key staff, just so you don't have too many people present. It's not really the purpose to start to re-challenging, revisit the entire audit or inspection, but if during the debrief you hear something that you're not sure you understand what the concern is, of course, you can still ask at that moment, what are you really talking about? What clarification can you give? It's not the point to go into discussion, but if you're saying, okay, what you're saying right here is clearly wrong and I have the proof readily available, you can do that. So it's not the point to rediscuss, but you can challenge something that is ostensibly completely wrong. Make a note of the observations that are being given, or ask to receive a draft of their observations early, and confirm where the responses to the observations should be sent, confirm timelines, and spend time to thank the auditor or the inspector as well. They're also doing their job. You might not always like what they see, but they have a job. It's an important job. So you thank them for their time and energy. At a closing meeting, while you will get feedback, there will be no grading. So it will not be, this is critical, major, minor. However, what you will hear are typically going to be the more important things. In terms of follow-up, one more poll, which of the following statements regarding the follow-up is true? You should start working on the feedback from the inspector only once you've received their formal report, or it's a good idea to start working right away, or if you do not receive a formal grading, it is not necessary to evaluate the findings further.
Okay, this is the third poll and the last one.
Yeah.
Just give them some more seconds. Okay, we are receiving them.
Good.
Okay, I think we've reached, so let's end the poll and I share the results.
Okay, so it's a little bit more distributed than the previous answers, but indeed the majority of people indeed say it's a good idea to start working on the feedback right away. There's a few that say to start working on the feedback from the moment report is received. And then there's a few that say if you don't receive a finding, it's not necessary to create a formalized feedback. Thank you. I think the answers are coming in the next slides. Yeah, thank you, Angel. Let's see, moving to the next slide. Yep, there we go. Indeed, the majority of you said already prior to the receipt of the report and based on the debrief information given during the exit meeting, you can start working on your root cause analysis. And the reason for that is when an auditor or inspection report comes back, depending a bit on how it's stated and who is doing it, you may have only a short period of time to provide a formalized CAPA plan. And that does not always give you enough time to do a good root cause analysis. So if you start earlier, you can work on your root cause analysis a bit more, and you can start thinking about what are going to be the best CAPA solutions. And then at the time of the report, you can fine tune if still needed. Obviously, you're not returning anything to an auditor or inspector until that final report has been received, because there might still be differences between the exit meeting and the actual report. Although for the majority of things, the main items will definitely come back. So the risk is relatively low to do work that's not going to be valuable anyway. In Europe, and a lot of auditors that I have worked with will usually grade in 4 categories. That is, they will consider items to be critical, major, minor, or they will just have an observation, or sometimes called a comment. Obviously the more to the left, the critical ones are more important to tackle. Typically for CAPAs, what they will look for is definitely CAPAs for critical and major findings. And it depends a bit on the organization. CAPAs may be expected for minor findings as well, but not always. The FDA works differently. So if they have a concern, they will issue what is called a Form 483, and they will only do that when they have a true concern. Otherwise, they will just give you feedback, but not a Form 483. The Form 483 may then include findings for which they will then say no action indicated, voluntary action indicated, or official action indicated. Again, where the official action indicated are the ones that will definitely need to be tackled in a formalized response going back to the FDA. So it's slightly different in their approach. But again, the formalization of root cause analysis and CAPA building, of course, lies more with items that are seen to significantly impact the regulations or the patients or the quality of the drug, whereas the other ones are less important. So in terms of root cause analysis, that needs to be thorough, looking at, you can use multiple methodologies to go through root cause analysis. And it's based on that root cause analysis that you create CAPAs. I sometimes see CAPAs come in that seem to come out of nowhere because it's the easy solution, but indeed the root cause analysis is the key part of building good CAPAs. One more quote from Philip Crosby, who was a businessman who contributed to management theory. Quality is free. Quality is not a gift, but it is free, and it's the unquality of things that cost money. Which links back to my first position, is that preparing for an audit really lies in the day-to-day work. Thank you all. That was the end of my presentation. Angel, I don't know if we have questions that have come in that we want to answer.
Yes, sure. Let's open up for the Q&A session. We have already received some of them. Just to remember that you can use the Q&A button below your screen. So this is the end of the Delphine's presentation. So let's go for the Q&A session. We have about 16 minutes to cover as many as we can, right? So feel free to pose your questions there. I will collect them, and Delphine make her best to respond all of them. Okay, so
unprepared.
That's right. This is the most interesting ones. Okay, so let's go for the first one from Amaya. She says, I heard about an harmonization in inspections between the EMA and the FDA around 2017. Are there still differences between FDA and the EMA inspections in their purpose?
The overall purpose is the same. So it's answering those 6 questions. That remains the same. The way they go about it is still somewhat different, but it is true that they share audit and inspection findings with each other. That indeed means also that EMA might not inspect something that audit has been inspected by the FDA, or the other way around, because they accept also each other's reports now, which, while previously they would share, they now also accept each other's reports as well. So the purpose remains the same. The methodology is overall the same, but the way they approach it might somewhat be different still. I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
Yes, I hope so. Perfect. If not, Amaya, let us know. Right, let's go to another one from Magdalena. Is there any regulation which defines that records should be kept only in paper or only electronically? And the second question related to that is, if manufacturer guarantee that partially electronic records, which have been validated according to 21 CFR Part 11, and partially in paper records are established, if they can be accepted by notified bodies, FDA or any other regulatory bodies.
As far as I know, there is no regulation that's saying this must be on paper or this must be electronically. So you have to indeed create an environment of record creation that meets the Alcoa++ principles. If you indeed go for paper, that means all the retention and other principles around paper requirements need to be there. But they're the same principles. For electronic systems as well, like you said, 21 CFR Part 11, EMA Part 11 will apply as well. And you can also have indeed, like you said, a hybrid system. So you just need to understand and need to be able to present and explain that, why you have made certain selections and why certain things are the way they are, and how you meet with that use the Alcoa++ principles.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. In fact, there is no clear indication whether you use paper or electronic. Another issue is regarding the efficiency of your processes. Yes. Obviously, if you manage a paper-based system in a big company, it's going to be really difficult to be effective. Okay, let's go to another question from Ross. Should you treat internal audits or self-inspections in the same intensity as an external audit from a regulator?
That may depend, I would say. Like I said, you can apply some of this methodology as well for internal audits, even though indeed the stress levels and the collaborative is a bit more closer and maybe less formal. So it depends a bit on who is doing what exactly and what you're also expecting from that. But yeah, you can, if for internal self-audits or self-inspections, you can be a bit looser with some of the elements that I've just presented. But if the relationship with your QA is a bit more difficult, you might want to follow similar processes anyway. I find it useful for audits as well to sort of set something up because it gives structure. Even if you're still close to the auditee, but it gives a bit structure. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Delphine. Right. Another question is, what are the criteria for planning an audit based on risk assessment approach? Can you give us, Delphine, some highlights, some tips and tricks, probably?
That's more from the perspective of auditors and auditors organizations.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe sponsors as well. Yeah, so an audit program is also risk-based. Like everything today now is risk-based, which is a good thing because otherwise we're endlessly checking and controlling everything. And the risk, of course, is going to be dependent on the focus, obviously, of your department, but also on where you stand. Are you close to specific releases with regulatory authorities versus are you still far removed? Have we done something recently in a similar way, or has it been a very long time? Have we heard about issues or events that might trigger something earlier than we might have otherwise planned for? Public information can, especially for vendor audits, that might be an element as well. Is there public information available that triggers you something? So it is both the intensity of the relationship in combination with the phase you're in with the work and the next step that you anticipate. Especially for formalized interactions, are you expecting any inspections to come? And any potential other triggers, and all of that goes into the box to mix and match.
Okay.
I guess, yeah.
Thank you. Probably there's another question from Parasuremo. Which approach is can you select to conduct an audit? I guess that you can use the risk-based approach.
Yes.
Are there any other approaches differently from risk-based that could also help?
Well, you can, yeah, no, everything is risk-based. If you open up the concept of risk-based approach, you can, but your risk can be, you know, I want to avoid risk, and then you're very conservative, and then you're auditing a lot. Or you can indeed say, I accept, you know, I have a significant appetite for risk, and then you will audit less. Is there something mandatory? Especially in GMP, there are expectations for self-inspections and audit programs. In GCP as well, there's now a tendency to have an audit plan. So that you sort of at the start of a year or start of a certain period, you anticipate to do certain audits, but they're also always risk-based as well. So, and then you can ad hoc still add things. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Right. We have a question from Dave. He's asking about the comparison between the regular audit or the medical device single audit program. Is there anything particular to think about this medical device single audit program audit? Are you aware of that, Delphine? About
honestly,
this,
I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
I can look it up. Angel, if you can take note of that question, and I will look it up, and we can see if we can return an answer to Dave.
Perfect.
Later, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to include this question in the PDF document, so you will receive it after the live session during the following weeks. Okay. Another one from Ofi. Should inspection fine be recorded as learning outcomes? This is very innovative.
Yes.
If you can record.
You know, within Europe, we're stuck with the GDPR. And I think if you want to have considerations for recording, I think you may want to consult with your DPO as well. And you, of course, will need the approval from everybody who's going to be involved in that audit, which means not just the audit or the inspector, but also every auditee, every single individual that's going to be interviewed. So can you? Probably yes, but I think you will need to find out the modalities, you know, the consent, the approval with the DPO, exactly what is possible. But there's no regulation that says you cannot do it from an inspector's point of view. So I think it's more going to be on the privacy point of view.
Yes. Yeah, sure. Okay, another question from, well, we have 5 minutes left, so we're covering most of the questions. So another question from Keshav. Are there any harmonized audit checklist or any methodology which can meet the regulatory expectations for every regulatory agency, such as a US FDA, MHRA, UGMP?
I'm not sure if between agencies there are harmonized materials. Overall, they will still do the same thing. EMA has for GCP, under Eudralex volume 10 has some inspection guides that will be followed by all European medicines, European agencies that are under EMA, so no longer MHRA. MHRA may have something on their website. I haven't checked for a while if they have checklists or guidances for the inspectors there. FDA has also some guidance and inspection materials on their website as well. So if you will receive an inspection for the first time for the FDA, for example, there is a lot of information on their website on what to expect when being inspected as well. So, but fully aligned between the different agencies, no, not really.
Okay. All right. Another one from Carolina. Could you explain a little more about the follow-up upon receipt of an FDA audit report?
Well, the FDA doesn't generally give a report as a matter of routine. So if the outcome was okay, they will not give you a report afterwards. So you will only get, if you get something from the FDA, you should probably start to worry because they will only usually send something when they are issuing a 483. And the 483 means that they have real concerns about what you're doing. Otherwise, a lot more is informal.
Yeah, right. Okay, good. Another question, how can you deal with it if the audit report is not handed over to you because another organization is interposed? And the second question, well, let's go for the first one.
I think that's when you are in relationship with other partners upfront in your contract, build this in. But obviously, we are also a consulting company. We don't share our audit reports with everybody. So, I mean, if a client comes in and says, have you been audited by, yeah, we have been audited, but I'm not going to share an audit report issued by another company. I will be able to present a certificate that we have been audited, but not the audit report itself. But if it's the same company, then, you know, if they can't find it internally with their own matters, then they can still have it from our end as well. So it depends a bit, but if it's for your services and they have been audited, they should be sharing the information if it's for particular to your services, but you should probably have that in your agreement from the start.
Okay, perfect. Right, I think we've covered most of them. I will also collect the remaining ones, so Delphine will be able to respond them. So we will include them in our comprehensive PDF documents. All right, so this is the end of the session. Now it's time for the wrap up. So I hope you found the information of today that Delphine has shared to you. It has been valuable and also very insightful about the good auditing practices as an auditee. Delphine, I'd like to thank you very much for your support during today. As usual, thank you very much. I also want to thank all the participants that has joined the webinar for their time to attend and for the good questions they have posted. And for those of you who still have unanswered questions, don't worry, because what we will do is what I have explained. We will collect them and respond them. You will receive a PDF document with not only the information from the training, but also other extra content for you to go over whenever you feel you need it, right? So I wish you all the best and have a lovely day today. Thank you very much for being part of this webinar, and see you next time in next webinar.
Thank you. Bye-bye.